How's everybody doing? I'm really surprised that my people showed up so we can talk about walleye fishing, lake fishing. So I'm Mark Beauvais. I'm a fourth generation Lake Oreille angler. I love Lake Oreille, and the big thing about it is it's such a diverse fishery. It's basically a micro Great Lakes. I'm here to talk about how to catch big walleye and big pike. So hopefully you guys can catch some. Alright, beep. Alright, so right now we're in the pre-spawn pattern for walleye. Right now, water temp is 39 degrees at the mouth of Clark Fork, and it's way colder than that around the pack. So all the fish here are pre-spawn. They're at their biggest point right now. The big thing that you're going to have to do with cold water is you're going to have to slow down your presentation. So I brought some rods, and right now what I'm doing is everything I rig modularly. Everybody's probably got line counter rods in the boat, right? This is something everybody fishes with. I've got 10 of these in my boat. They're all rigged the exact same way. So you've got a crankbait snap. This is like the first thing that goes on. I'm running Power Pro with a 100-foot top shot of mono, 15-pound mono. What this allows me to do is I can change what I'm doing really quick. This is modular rigging. Super important this time of year and throughout the season. So right now the big thing is you gotta fish slow. Your slowest presentation that you can fish is either a slow death hook, which I have rigged up here on a worm. How many of you guys know what a slow death hook is? Some of you guys. So this is an Aberdeen style hook. I wish I could have everybody zoom in on this, but this will make a worm spin like a cut plug herring. You're gonna run this, there's two different ways, right? There's two different kinds of bottom lockers, right? Your entire fishery for walleye is gonna involve lead. Unless you're fishing like later in the season like May and that, these fish are gonna be in like 3 feet of water. So you're going to be running, lipless base, but we're going to talk about that later. So this is a standard bottom walker, right? This is a slider rig bottom walker. This is rigged up with a slider rig. So I've got the ability to snap in and out different ways. Right now, everything I'm running is 3 ounce. So I'm fishing 20 feet of water on my planer boards. My setback's 25 feet. I'm running like 1 to 1.2 miles an hour. Couple different ways to fish, like obviously the slow death hook, it's going to spin, a worm, like a cut plug herring. You just want that nice, slow roll. If you've ever fished cut plugs for salmon, that's exactly what you want. If I don't leave another rod, thank you, sir. So, with this crankbait snap, I could go from running cranks to running bottom walkers real quick. Snap on this bottom walker just like this, and then I could grab a worm harness like this. This is another really effective bait. I run 3 number 2 hooks, 2 little bitty beads. These are 4 mil beads and a smile plate. This thing puts out a lot of flash, and it's really effective. I've caught more 20-pound pike on that next to dead bait. This thing crushes about everything in the fishery. So also does it. Real basic presentation in cold water. You gotta finesse fish. So say you find a bunch of fish and you fit 2 fish in 2 passes. The big thing that you're gonna want to do is be constantly looking at your electronics and know where you're getting bit. I'm going to go over like different areas. You're going to want to bump to the next slide. Let's see where we're at. So right now, it's between January and March 15th. The fish are going to be in generally deeper than 20 feet of water. Can you bump to the slide that shows a contour? Okay. So this is actually just off the mouth of the Clark Fork River. Let me grab this one. What you're looking for is spots like this. This is called the littoral zone, right? And then you got these little depressions in here. This is going to be in between 20 and 40 foot of water. It's going to take you a while, and then you've got these big flats. This is actually a pretty big area. This is probably 1,000 yards, and this is a big flat in here. Surrounded by shallow water, and then you've got really deep water in here. So what I've done, this is just to kind of give you an idea, this is this spot right here. I've got my high side of the flat, my two outside pitches of the flat, and I'm going to just do laps in here because I know there's fish in here, I've caught fish in here. You're going to just grid water. Okay, so say you're finding fish, you've got an X, right? Because this is a big area, this is, 1,000 yards. You're going to sit on those fish and you're going to jig, right? So there's a couple different kinds of jigs that I use. Does anybody know what a stand-up jig is? Stand-up jig. So a stand-up jig, I don't know if you can see this. I'm going to tip this with a worm, and it's going to just stand up on the bottom just like this. This is as slow of a presentation as you could possibly have on walleye. This is key for those big pre-spawn females. I'm just going to be lifting this thing up off the bottom and letting it sit. I really like to jig when I have some wind, or I'm going to put my mid coat in and gear on like 1. And then I may stop, but you just want to just drag this thing with its head digging into the bottom. What does this imitate? This imitates a minnow that's feeding on the bottom. So say the fish, they're always going to eat that. But if you need a couple more water, this is a whistle jig. This is a jig you can cast. It's got a lot of flash. It's got some noise to it. It fishes pretty well. Another jig that works really well on not only walleye but smallmouth is this style stand-up crawfish. So we have signal crawfish in Lake Ponderosa. Crawfish are darker. They're actually the largest species of crawfish in North America, native species. And this is also a great jig. When you've got fish located, I tend to spend a lot of time jigging on fish. Particularly, say, I'm trolling around, catch a male. I can spend a lot of time where that male was pre-spawn. Maybe not right where that male was. I might tuck in a little further, but I'm looking for where those females are. They're feeding pretty heavily, but again, it's slow. Slow presentation is key. Can you bump me back to where we were? So we covered jigging. So hit the next slide. Next one. Okay, so plugs. Plugs can work this time of year. I shy away from them. You're gonna catch more pike on plugs this time of year. These are some plugs I really like. There's a lot of plugs that work. You could look at these. That's a swim team of plugs that I run. Those aren't on this board. That's on a board that's in my sled right now. Next slide. That's just, the 3-hook crawler rig. Anything with flash on it works. I've caught walleye on that. I've caught them on every color under the sun. I don't think it matters that much. So I'm going 0.8 to 1.5 miles an hour. Now, talking about running 10 rods, it's a lot, right? Lake Oreille, unlimited rod rule. To me, it's the coolest rule ever. I'm running these style boards, right? What's great about this style board? Well, I can have an exact setback on this. So what I'm doing is I'm figuring out, okay, I can be fishing between, say, 20 and 30 foot of water on this contour. My setback's going to be between, on my furthest outside board, it's going to be my longest one. That one's going to be 30. Next one is going to be 25. Next one is going to be 20. I'm constantly manipulating with my speed. This is a bobber, is what this is. I'm able to slow it down to where it stands up like this. I know I'm straight up and down, right? I speed up, I'm going like this. I can fish shallower or deeper with this at any time just by manipulating my speed. That's why I say between 0.8 and 1.5. Your lead on this is going to be constantly manipulated by your speed. So always be manipulating your speed to get the proper presentation. have 6 of these out, right? And then I'll have 4 rods, you know, just hanging out, 2 on the side, 2 straight out the back. I know what my setback should be on each one of these, just because I know where it's sitting right here, right? And I'm taking at the perfect speed for where I'm at. And then I'll adjust, right? We'll hit the next slide. All right, so you've got a pretty good bag of tricks for pre-spawn walleye. The one thing I didn't talk about, drop shotting. This works. You know, these little minnows, they work really good. They imitate little kokanee fry. Very good presentation alongside with your jigs. So the walleye spawning happens typically right around 45 degrees. The thing about walleye is they're extremely hard to catch during the spawn. I just give up on them. I just go fish other places. You'll find this, like the best guys on the Columbia, some of my best friends like TJ Hester and that, they give up fishing on them. There's like a 2-week period, it's not even worth it. Where are these fish going to spawn? They're in the lower pack, around the Long Bridge, Clark Fork Delta, mouth of Trestle Creek. We're finding them in the back side of the islands where Lightning Creek really dumps in. And so there's like this 2-week, they're broadcast spawning fish, right? So they're gonna get together in a group like this, spray and pray, 18 days, the little sea monkeys come out in the larval phase, and it's done. It's a quick event. You know, female will have upwards of 150,000 eggs. Kind of put it in perspective with like a trout, you know, a lot of our big trout species, maybe 10,000. Next slide. So post-spawn. This is the time when you go out and like really get numbers of walleye. This is like typically 15th of April on through May. The water's coming up, and this is when you plug fish. This is when I'm running 10 rods, I'm running a bunch of plugs, and it's just mayhem. Lots of different species. Probably my favorite plug, so we're gonna talk about like a 10 rod spread, right? So your outside rod, all these are rig rods, right? You got a 100-foot top shot. You're gonna take a shallow diving plug for your outside plug. This is a BX minnow. This is probably accounted for more than a dozen 10-pound walleye in my boat. It's a really good plug. Tons of big leg trout, every species imaginable, big pike, whatever. This is typically my outside rod. This is the first rod that goes out, outside board. 100 to 150 foot setback, clip it on, send it out. Typically I got 300-ish feet on my counter. Next rod in. It depends on where I'm fishing, right? Some spots, if I'm fishing like, I found fish that are real shallow, you know, right up against a tributary mouth or something like that, that are feeding real heavily, I'm running all floating baits. Or I may be staggering and fishing as deep as 30, 40 feet. So, but I always have a surface bait out, right? There's nothing stopping you from, because you never know when a big rainbow or whatever that's just cruising around the surface is going to eat this. Your next bait is going to be rigged with your snap, right? And your bottom walker. I've got every size from a 1/4 ounce all the way up to 5 ounces in my boat. Your middle one is going to be, you know, say I'm fishing in 8 foot of water, I'm going to have a 1/4 ounce for my middle one, and I'm going to grab either a scatter Impala or a standard F11 Impala, 6 foot leader, send it out. I'm going to have, say it's 8 foot of water, this is where you kind of got to mess with it. You let it out and it's just sticking the bottom every now and again, that's the perfect setback, snap it in, send it out. Your inside board is going to be much shorter, right? You're going to run a heavier weight. I'm going to be running usually anywhere from a 1/2 ounce to 1.5 ounces. I might even run 3 ounces, right? You know, and you just want to have that staggered in. So you got like a V spread. Now, why do you want to have a V spread on your board? So say you hook out on your outside board, the fish is way far out back there. It's just going to slide over your inside boards, right? No tangles, no mess, right? Next inside board, the exact same thing, right? The whole goal is to double or triple up when you're cruising through a pod of fish. The whole goal is no tangles all day, and that's why you're going to stagger and use your weights to stagger it, because it's always going to float over the next fish. And then I'm gonna run 4 rods on the inside. My inside rods always have a 3-ounce bottom locker on, or a 5-ounce bottom locker, depending on how deep I'm fishing. Some form of like an F11 Rapala, some form of a stick bait. And then I run what's called a shotgun plug. Like that Bagley is a great shotgun plug. These flicker shads, flicker minnows, great shotgun plugs. I have 2 rods going straight out the back. One of them is maybe 200 feet straight out, one of them's like 100. That also is baits. If I'm making hard turns, they're gonna just slide over the top of each other. And you can even run a floating plug straight out the back. I've done really well on spoons straight out the back. Particularly if I'm throwing offshore, I'll run the spoon straight out the back like a heavier spoon. You can mix it up, but the whole goal, you're gonna be trolling between 2 and 3 miles an hour, always be mixing up your speed. How I run my boat is I got my bow mount for my steering, and I have my kicker for propulsion, right? I hook up, I put the boat in neutral, I'm still going at like 3 power on my trolling motor, which is 0.8 miles an hour. My baits are still fishing, but I'm fishing a lot slower, right? My presentations are sinking. Just some things to think about when you're setting up your boats on that type of stuff. Hit the next slide. So, this time of year, it's all about hunting for pods of predators, right? The one thing that I've been fishing pond Oreille a long time, so I was like 3 years old. I got to experience like the epic bounty, fishery, all that stuff. Learned a lot about, lake trout, fish a lot with a lot of people in this room. They taught me a lot. So that walleye was caught in like 80 feet of water while we were targeting lake trout a couple of years ago. So the habitat kind of overlaps, right? Particularly when they're on the feed. I'll show you when we get to some charts like where this fishing actually occurred. But when you locate a pot of fish doing your plug program, you can jig on them. If you're just banging fish one after another on an X, get on the jig program. Another way you can do it, and I'm going to get into this on the pike stuff, is you can float fish with a walleye as well. That allows you to fish a lot more rods. Unlimited rod rule again, which is really helpful. We'll hit the next slide. So, we're going to talk about like the population, right? So, the oldest fish in our fishery are about 10 years old. Walleye can live to about 25 years. The majority of our fish are under 5 years old. And the most common age class are like 16 to 20 inch fish. They have really fast growth rates. So, a couple years, you've got fish to eat. Super high fecundity, average female, which is a 24-inch female, will produce between 80 and 125,000 eggs. Next slide. So the largest walleye caught, so I know Fishing Game did net every year, right? The biggest one was a 33-inch female. During their netting, that's post-spawn. So if that fish was caught pre-spawn, that fish would have been the state record. So there's probably a state record swimming out there right now. It's more than likely. I've been catching them up to 14, 15 pounds every year. So it's just a matter of time before somebody in this room ends up catching a state record. Next slide.
What is the state record?
It's like 17. It'd be like probably a 34 or 35 inch fish. I got one that was 33 inches post-spawn. Pretty close, 14.7. So this is their netting, right? These are all the species that they netted. Next slide. This is where they netted. So, a little preface on this. Between Trestle Creek and Hawkins Point, that's where they devoted basically all their effort, right? Because it's the only place that's easy for them to net. All these other spots, these were survey nets, they caught some fish, but that's why I spend, during that time frame, I spend most of my time in the Clark Fork Delta, because they're heavily netting on the other side of the lake. Next slide. So right now we've got this interesting incentive program, right? So there's 10 drawings per month for heads, you get $100. I won a couple $100 doing this. There's 50 tagged fish that are worth a grand. They did a pit tag in their head. No one's caught one that I know about, and no one has, because I spoke to Fishing about this. It's a mark recapture study. Some of those fish were caught in nets, though. That's a fact. So after the first year, there were 754 fish caught in the fishery. The harvest was about 1,500 fish. Now, this is like pure science. Walleye thrive on a 50% mortality rate. So you can harvest half the population of walleye in the fishery, and the population will continue to grow. That's how well they reproduce. So don't feel bad about eating walleye for dinner. They're delicious. Next slide. So what are they doing? Every 3 years they do an index net. In the fall they're doing that this year. They're gonna again do more netting. But the cool thing that they're doing, and I know the guy that's doing the graduate program, everybody's all concerned, oh, they're gonna eat all the kokanee or they're not. Well, they're actually doing a study on that. And they're gathering a ton of data about it. Next slide. So I've killed quite a few walleye. This is all the stuff I found in their stomach. It totally depends on where you're catching them, right? There's so much forage in this fishery. You know, the most delicate forage species is definitely kokanee, really easy to collapse, but these things will eat whatever they can get. I mean, these are all the things you want to be able to imitate. I mean, you can catch these things on chironomids. Like, they eat little tiny chironomids during the summer. We're out there fishing, they're gorging themselves on them. So next slide. So we kind of went into this, we'll go to the next slide. So this is data on the fish that they've got, their telemetry tags. A buddy of mine actually caught one of the telemetry fish. These are definitely some good spots. Does anybody here have a jet boat and want to talk about the Clark Fork River? Okay, so there's like two guys. Clark Fork itself, jigging, down trolling crawler harnesses. There's quite a few walleye in there. Up trolling cranks, standard river walleye fishing. I would say right now is the time to probably go fish it. There's fish up there staging. Next slide. Alright, so this is the Clark Fork Delta, right? We've got all these little points in here. This isn't the best representation of it. It's a little different than this, but this is the littoral zone. Is this zone right here. This is what you're going to want to be focusing on. Is all that in there. Now as the water rises, all this, that says 2 feet of water, this is just one giant 8-foot deep flat. That is a great place to go plug fishing. Next slide. All of it, all the way over to Sheepherder. This is my favorite sleeper area. This is, you know, Sheepherder Point was that slide. All this Owens Bay in here is really good fishing. So where we were catching all those Lakers is somewhere in here. I'm just going to say it was somewhere in here and we caught a big walleye in there one day. Next slide. This is a fantastic area to fish. This is where the bulk of the walleye in our fishery are. I'd spend my time in this area. This is the West Arm. So, where's our Long Bridge? Here's Sandpoint. We got our Long Bridge. This is the mouth of the Pack River. I wouldn't mess around. It's just so stinking shallow in here. There's like spots you can pull plugs, like even late in the spring. I've always done best just pulling crawler harnesses in here. I've had some big number of days in here doing this. And sneaking into this flat in here, sneaking down by the bridge over here. I mean, there's a lot of good water in here, and there's a lot of places to explore. Anderson Point is probably the most underrated spot, but this is deep water fishing. You kind of have to know what you're doing. It's a jigging spot. You can crawler harness fish it if you know what you're doing. Mess around with it for a while. You know, if you know how to crawler harness fish over 100 feet of water, you're going to do really well on this fishery. Don't be afraid to fish well over 100 feet of water if you want to target walleye. Next slide. This is just kind of my little spiel. You know, a lot of people are concerned with how it's being managed. I'm just going to say Lake Pend Oreille is the only place in the world that's grown 30-pound rainbows. And it's because of that little fish right there. So, it's what grows a 30-pound rainbow. It's a product of energetics and genetics. So we have a unique genetic strain called the Gerard Rainbow, evolved in Kootenai Lake in BC. They evolved alongside white sturgeon, burbot, bull trout, and kokanee. These fish, they just eat kokanee, they get huge, right? And energetics. Energetics is a concept of biology that states energy out versus energy in. We've experienced a ton of little kokanee in our fishery, right? So the fish are able to put on a lot of pounds really quickly. They're not expending a ton of energy to get a lot of food. So people are concerned, okay, so we're managing these fish like walleye, pike, and lake trout with no limit harvest, you know, we care about our resources. And I agree, I care about having the opportunity to go catch pike, walleye, and lake trout. Been fortunate to catch them every year, kind of at will. And there's also a commercial fishery because we as sport anglers aren't harvesting enough. Otherwise, we're going to have this imbalance. This happened in my lifetime. The fishery collapsed. We're catching 8-pound rainbows that are spawning like this. Like that wasn't a goal. So next slide. So these are a couple rainbows over, some of them are over 30 pounds, all of them are over 27. That's just a product, and this is recent. This was past couple of years. Why? Because we have kokanee. So we need to manage for kokanee in this fishery. Next slide. So northern pike. So right now I went pike fishing. I got out at the crack of 11 o'clock today, and I fished till 3. We caught a couple nice pike. Right now the pike are pre-spawn. So they can be found pretty deep right now, surprisingly. One of the pike we caught today was in 45-foot of water. We were actually looking for walleye. We were trolling crawler harnesses, and we got 2. Next slide. All right, so spawning activity starts at 40 degrees. So I snuck in, loaded the boat in. Water's 39.6, right? These fish are starting to get into the shallow parts of water. So how do you catch pike and catch them well? A couple ways. They eat a crawler harness. You're going to catch them inadvertently, trolling plugs and going which way. Float fishing, dead bait. So when I'm jigging, I usually always have one of these out. I call this a gator trap. This is just 2 little treble snow. I got 40-pound sea gar. Pike won't bite through this. I fish bluefin tuna with this stuff. This stuff's tough as nails. You're gonna run a bunch of float rods, herring, smelt, whatever you want, under a float, cast a bunch of them out, and you're just gonna drift with the current while you're jigging. Keep an eye on those floats. These fish, when they pick up a bait, they're gonna hang on to it forever. They're gonna grab it like this, and they're gonna turn it in the mouth, and they're gonna swallow it. You got little bitty hooks on it. You don't need to really set the hook that hard. Just reel down on it. But give them a minute to chew on it. I had 2 buddies go out the other day. One guy had 22, the other guy had 8. A lot of pike in the fishery now. There's more pike than, like, there have been pike in Pond Oreille for the last 30 years. So I caught my first pike in Pond Oreille when I was like 5. But it's been incrementally getting better and better and better. There's a lot more. Now, pike aren't really going to have the effect like that a walleye could as like a pelagic predator on kokanee. There's a cool game fish to have. You know, there's concern that they could eat, you know, they're living in the delta, so they could eat juvenile bull trout, rainbows, and everything else. But the pike and Pond Oreille are good to eat. I keep a couple big females a year because I like eating pike eggs. So next slide. So these pike are, when they spawn, they're going to go super shallow. We found some pike spawning in some creeks down on the Pond Oreille side, and they're all over the system. They'll lay up to 300,000 eggs. They go super shallow. Their eggs actually stick to the substrate, a little different. They can live up to 30 years, and they can eat something a third the length of their body size. So I don't know if anybody knew this year, but the pike in the Pacific Northwest have some of the fastest growth rates anywhere in the world. So we're growing gigantic pike. Last year, the biggest one I put in my boat was like just shy of 30 pounds. And I had, I think, a dozen over 20. So there's probably a magical 40-pounder swimming around out there. Now, why are they getting so big? Well, They're eating performance-enhancing drugs. These fish, they interact with kokanee a couple times a year. Kokanee die when they spawn. These things are garbage pit. They're gonna clean up the lake. That's why this works so good, dead bait, because that's what they're keyed in on. You know, they'll eat other stuff, but they've spent all fall and all winter just gorging themselves with dead kokanee, particularly all these ones in the Delta. All those dead kokanee tumble down the Clark Fork and they end up in the floodplain, you know, in that littoral zone. So next slide. So after the spawn happens, which is soon, it's going to start. We need more of a rising water event to happen before they'll actually spawn, but they're really staging right now. The fish are going to disperse, they're spread out, and then they're going to start feeding heavily. You know, if you want to catch pike anytime after the spawn, just go in the bays, focus on, you know, look for weed beds, windswept points, structures, forage. Really big pike, they're going to be deep eating whitefish. You know, if you want to find a really big one during the summer, that's where it's going to be, throw bulldogs. And if you do that, you'll get some follows, but be prepared to spend a lot of time looking for a big one. Now's the time to get a really big one. You know, either you're going to catch one with a crawling harness, or you're going to go target them with dead bait. Next slide. And all the big record pike from Coeur d'Alene, those are all dead bait fish. Next slide. So, these are just some dead bait stuff. I don't anchor when I dead bait fish. I like to have some movement, right? I didn't bring a quick strike rig. I've got some in my boat. Basically, it's like a little V, right? 2 trebles, fish bites, you can set the hook faster. They work. I call these gator snares, gator trap rigs. These work well. It's just a snell, you know, little treble. You know, a bunch of float rods, go out, drift. Big Lakers will pick this up too. Some of my biggest Lakers, like that guy was caught on dead bait. Next slide. So here's some tips for success. So say late spring, right? If you're not checking your gear non-stop, you're not going to catch fish. You're going to be combating weeds like they're your worst enemy. So that's why I run 10 rods. I may only have 2 rods fishing at a time because of how weedy where I'm fishing is. That's just the reality of spring fishing with plugs in this fishery. That's why float fishing is really good, and you can float fish with a worm and a jig, okay? It allows you to keep your gear clean longer. Will you catch more fish? It's debatable. I've had great days on both. You know, I take for success fishing many rods as you can handle. Prep your gear prior to fishing. So like, if I'm fishing crawler harnesses, I'm gonna have boards full of crawler harnesses ready. So if I'm breaking off gear, all I'm doing is I'm unwinding, snapping a new one on, sending it out, right? That's why all my gear is rigged modularly. If I want to switch up, these have bobber stops on them. All I do is I snip that off, slide a bobber on with a bead, and throw a hook on it, and it's ready to go. So that's, if you get anything from the seminar, rig your rods so it's modular, it's quick, it's easy to change over. You have 10 of them just laying in your boat. All your gear's on boards. It makes your life a lot simpler. It's easy to make a plan, but the best laid plans always seem to change. You know, I would pick an area that you want to fish, right? Commit to a west arm. Anytime your gear's not in the water, you're not fishing, right? Pick an area and fish. There's fish all over this fishery. Like every chunk that I just showed you, there's tons of fish in all of those. Commit to that area, you're gonna learn some waypoints and then mark those waypoints. You know, I've got a treasure chest full of waypoints that I know, okay, there's fish here, fish here, fish here. And I bring an aqua view every time I go fishing. And I'll look, if I'm marking fish, I wanna know what those are. It could just be whitefish that are hard to catch. I'll go back there with speakies and blade baits and go catch those the next time. But always go make a plan and just choose a piece of water to go learn for the day. Obviously, use your electronics. I've got Marantz Electronics HDS system. Can't speak enough about having a GPS on one side and a depth finder on one side. You know, I've got side imaging. It helps, but I don't know, just straight down, knowing where my depth is, knowing where my waypoints are in relationship, and mapping out the spot. I usually have multiple tactics rigged and ready to go, you know, modular rigging your line counters, leader boards, and jigging rods. I didn't bring any jigging rods. If you want to know what a jigging rod is, like any spinning rod you have, it's under 7 foot, it's perfect for it. Don't need to spend a lot of money on jigging rods. My jigging rods are like $50. They're cheap, they work great. Next slide, please. Okay, so thoughts on planer boards. There's tons of planer boards out there. I have both mass boards and standard boards. I'm gonna make a video on this. So probably nobody in here knows what a kite clip is. I do a lot of blue water fishing. I fish bluefin tuna with a kite, right? So what that allows you to do if you rig your mass with that style clip, I can put my setback on this, on the fly I can adjust it. Because all it is it's a ring, it goes into a clip, I can let out line or I can pull line in. It's been a total game changer for my bottom water fishing. And it's not something I've talked a lot about, kind of don't want to talk about it, but it will revolutionize the way you bottom water fish. Because you can adjust on the fly. I can fish any contour that I want. I can go from fishing 20 feet of water to 200 feet of water. Just by letting out line, and I can wind it back up. And then when I'm bit, I'm bit. It's the way we fish bluefin tuna, you know. Instead of a kite, it's on a board. Inline boards, in my opinion, get bit better with plugs. And then a lot of you guys fish rainbows. Big boards, in my opinion, get bit more on flies. Just my opinion. There's a lot of experience pulling flies in this room. All right, next slide. So I kind of talked a little bit about this. This is my 10 rod flying V spread. Obviously, outside boards, surface. The next inside boards, lighter weight, but closer setback, right? So the outside's 100, inside 75, next one closest is 50. You know, the inside ones are 3 ounce, so ounce and a half, you know, and then 2 flat lines, 100 foot straight out, and then 2 weighted plug rods, 5 ounces straight off the side. Those ones are straight off the side. Those are like my downriggers. I have downriggers on my boat. I used them twice last year. Just gone to lead. Next slide. And that's it. That's my beautiful wife. She's the mother of my 2 beautiful children. She's at home watching after my 2 hound dogs and my 2 kids. We went fishing today. She caught pike today. It wasn't quite as big as that. So, you guys have any questions? Yes, sir. Okay.
Is that just an example that food cell run for a dead bait?
Yes, sir. Yep.
What's the go-to dead bait for dead bait?
Smelt or herring. If you can get them, like, I always got interesting rules. You have to use non-bait fish, right? So northern pikemen, if you get small ones, but a pike will eat a big bait. They're just not like most pikemen are on catching these big gargantuan ones. But if you get ones that are like that or like that, and I do get those, they work great. The whole trick with dead bait is you want to get that thing sitting horizontal, just like this in the water column. That'll get bit way more, or just like about like that will get bit. You don't want the thing kind of goofy. You want the thing just sitting there in the water column. Just.
Are those the size tremolots you're using, or is that just for example on that?
I'll go smaller than this. These are tiny, tiny hooks, right? Because you don't really need to set the hook. And you want to let the fish chew on the bait. Like, you get a bobber down, oh, just sit there, 1,001, 1,002. It's like tip-up fishing, right? You have to ice fish. A long time goes by. That's the fish grabbing the bait, turning it in his mouth, and starting to swallow it. And then you're going to just reel. Just come tight. You're not going to set the hook. You're just going to come tight. I'm hooked.
Are you using a sea guard per leader on your dead baits?
Yes, 40 pound. Or 50, or 60, whatever. I just had 40. They're not going to chew it off. They won't chew off 20. Like, I've got more 20-pound pike on 20-pound sea guard, and it's just fine. The stuff I was using today with about 2 pike on. Not a nick in it. Green label. You can use a bunch of it. That P-line SST is really good too. There's a bunch of good fluorocarbon. Most fluorocarbons are made at 2 different manufacturing facilities, so there's a lot of private label going on in that industry.
Anybody
Yes, it's good. There's a lot of fish down there, of many different kinds.
How's water down here?
All the way to the dam, there's walleye, and lots of pike. That's a really pikey area, a lot of good bass fishing, there's really good largemouth fishing down there. There's some big lake whitefish down there, lake whitefish in some of the deeper holes. There's trout, there's really good brown trout fishing down there. It's good fishing in general. Our fishery's huge. I mean, hundreds of miles of water. I've been fortunate enough to spend 30 years on it, and I haven't fished at all. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of water, you know, it's south end, I've caught walleye in Idlewild Bay, I haven't pike fished it. Most of my south end fishing, so I've got a boat on the south end, more at McDonald's, I fish a lot of lake whitefish down there, a lot of rainbows, bull trout, lakers. I have caught walleye there in Idlewild Bay. I've only tried it once, we caught like a 5-pounder. We tried for like 6 hours, so it's not the best, but they're there. All the way to the dam is good. I fished the whole thing. I have a 20-foot jet sled. The reason why I own that jet sled is fish Lord Park Fork River. Yes, sir. Yeah, I catch a lot. If you want to learn to catch lake whitefish, I have a video of catching them off the dock at McDonald's. I've been kind of tight-lipped about anywhere else. The trick with that is you fish the geeky rigs, and then you're going to run blade baits and just kind of jig. And the whole thing with that is the geeky rigs are going to imitate mysis shrimp. I'll tip them with like a maggot or like a Potski egg. But you want to clod the bottom. That's going to you'll see mud on the bottom. I use an aqua view every time I fish lake whitefish. That's the trick, is you want to know that they're there. Because the bite's so subtle on those things, and like you may not get a lot of bites. When it's wide open, it's wide open. My dad and I have killed 50 of them, him and I, in like 3 hours. Like one right after another after another. I've seen some really fantastic bites on them. They're probably the best eating fish. They're really good. That's my weight. And the whole thing with that is it puts a lot of vibration in the water, and you're putting that puff of smoke on the bottom, right? So they're thinking, oh, there's something foraging down here. Oh, the mysis shrimp picked up. That's what that sabiki is. And then, you know, anywhere you find kokanee spawning, those things are just little kokanee egg nest robbers. That's a tiny kokanee if you want to have big numbers. Yes, sir.
You had a slide about the various types of fish that walleyes consume. How important is the kokanee to the walleye diet?
I think it's opportunity, right? I mean, it's another forage base in the system, right? The big thing is okay, so we have so much habitat. This is just me talking, okay? You talk to biologists. You know, it's important for the fishery that we have kokanee, you know, as a whole, that we have kokanee, right? Walleye have such a high fecundity, right? You go to Roosevelt, why are Roosevelt's kokanee huge? And this is directly from biologists. Predation is so high that it creates an energetic level to where there's not many, but there's a ton of food, so they can grow really big. Why are they teeny tiny in Lake Pondere? There's a lot of them, so they eat all the food, right? It's just a difference there. Now, why isn't there a lot of kokanee in Roosevelt? Well, there's a lot of walleye. You know, like a lot. Like, I went out, we killed a limit in like 2 hours for 4 guys, and that's 16 apiece. It's not that hard to catch a lot of walleye in Roosevelt. So that's kind of the concern. That's why they're heavily studying it, trying to get the best science available. But they're not going anymore. Yes, sir.
Where should we be targeting the walleye in the Clark Fork?
Where?
Yeah, all the way up.
I've caught them all the way from the dam, all the way down to the delta, in about every hole in the river.
Okay.
Up at the hatchery is a really good area. If you're catching trout, you're going to catch a lot of trout when you fish the Clark Fork. You're going to catch a lot of cutthroat, you're going to catch a lot of rainbows, like little dinky rainbows, right? They're the juvenile Gerards. And those Gerards are going to live in the river until they're like 16, 18 inches, a lot of them. And anywhere where you're catching those, you're you're fishing in a little too fast of water, and you're gonna wanna slide in a little tight. That's my advice for there. My favorite way, I didn't bring it, you know what a walking sinker is?
Yeah.
It's like a little hook shape,
Yep.
about that tall. I just kind of down troll those, almost side drift those with a crawler harness, and I'm using something buoyant with my crawler, right? And that's the trick to getting them. Right post spawn, they're all over in there, and we were getting them casting like little grubs with like, I don't have any of them. It's like I'd have to look it up. Any jig that you can cast in the tree with a flash on it, we were getting them in like 3-4 foot of water, casting towards the shore. I think what doesn't matter as much as just putting a bait near them that's right about this big, because that's what they're eating. I've up-trolled them, caught them a bunch on various deep diving plugs too. You know, plug that's banging into the bottom, you know. I would like trolling uphill like half mile an hour to a mile an hour. I've got some really big females doing that. And that's typically post-spawn females. Right now, you can probably get a big, I know you can get your big pre-spawn female up there. Just find a nice slow spot.
What's a good launch? It's kind of close to that Forage.
I don't know if Johnson's open yet, but they just put a new launch. Johnson's closed. So there's a launch at the bridge there. So if you hang a right, there's a bridge right before Johnson. And you can launch with a sled. Don't ever do it with a prop. You can do it with your boat, but no boat you have. Yeah, there's a lot of guys fishing there.
So right there, the bridge, and come out.
So you go through Clark Fork.
You're right.
They're Island launch is what it's called.
Bring waders.
You're gonna need waders for sure. That's a sketchy launch. Be careful going there. I don't want to recommend it. I'll text you. Just don't go there. It's a sketchy one.
I'm gonna ask you about going up that river too. It's sketchy.
Fishing the Clark Fork, I've traveled out 5 times personally, and I have a lifetime of experience there. The flow will go from 3,000 CFS to 30,000 CFS in 20 minutes. They ramp the snot out of it. It's a fairly dangerous place to fish. Historically, I've always, before they fixed that launch, I always launched at Hope and would jet through the lake. And then jetting through the lake at 3,000 CFS, if you don't know your line exactly, you're gonna gravel out. Like, there's a stretch that's like 3 inches of water for like 100 yards. And then there's like no channel in between. Like, if you're off, and you're stuck there until they ramp the flows again, when it's that low. It's a tricky spot. I love it, but you may gravel out. That's why my boat's a 20 footer, not 23, because I can get it off myself. Any other questions? I don't pay attention to it. I go fishing when I can. There's so much written about it, but I'll say this. I fished full moon. I've had, like at night, I've had no success doing it. I've had nights where I've crushed them, and I've had nights where I had like 0 for 12 hours straight and crush them during the day. Why? I don't know. Your question, sir?
I was going to ask you a recommendation for pike fishing in the summer when the water is deep. So where would you start targeting as far as how?
So summer big pike. I mean, sheepherder's probably a good spot to start. I mean, cover water, fish big baits. You know, you're going to be looking for that time frame. Lake whitefish, which is what they're going to be feeding on. You know, they want that soft fin fish. They're going to be either eating kokanee fry, chironomids, or the like, and there's populations all over the place. you know, you're gonna wanna look for spots with good lake whitefish density. And it's not to say that you're not gonna find a big one in the back bay somewhere in 10 foot of water. There's a lot of pike in pond right now. It's, you know, up to 80. Yeah, I mean, my biggest pike was 80 foot of water. That pike was in 80 feet of water. So, I mean, that's where they're living. They're eating those things. And we did an autopsy on it. It had a lake whitefish that big in its stomach. So,
When they're in 80 foot of water, it's
I think our bait was like 50 feet down when that thing hit. And we were fishing this, and it was just kind of doing this, and then went. And I was like, oh, that's not bottom. Yeah, some. Most of it's been in the West Arm. I mainly fish in the spring. I hunt a lot, so my falls are typically, you know, I have a half dozen big game tags in my pocket, so I don't fish a lot in the fall. But yeah, I have caught, every time I've gone out and tried it, I've caught them. You know, anywhere, that whole, if we go back, that whole area around Hawkins Point's good. The whole Clark Fork's really good. So like, last September, my wife and I snuck out right after Barrett was born, and we fished the Clark Fork, and we fished the whole river. We jetted all the way up to the dam, and we side drifted worms the whole way down with blades. And we caught walleye, pike, a bunch of species of trout, some whitefish, just great fishing.
Mark, what would you say your best day of walleye fishing was? And what do you think your average day is?
So right now, if I'm getting 2 a day, I'm happy, but they're probably going to be big females because that's what I'm looking for. My best days will be 30 fish. I've had like 30 days where I've caught more than 10. You know, if I'm getting average days, probably 3 to 5. You know, if you know post spawn, I'm probably going to be 5 or more. I don't always fish all day.
The whitefish, congregate and spawn like they do in Pike, right?
Yeah, they do. There's a bunch of places that they spawn. They spawn right in front of McDonald's Resort. Places they spawn, but yeah, they spawn. I've done really well at Whiskey. I've done really well at Anderson. Yeah, they congregate, but they're hard to catch when they spawn, to be honest with you. My favorite time to catch them is like, now's good. I mean, summer's good. And the spawn's hard on just about every species. I try to avoid the spawn. You get lockjaw and some other things, Try and get them pre-spawn, and then like when they're actually in that act, they're tough to get, And they're kind of one of those broadcast spawners. They all get this big, huge ball. They're harder to catch. That's just my opinion on it. I've caught them as shallow as 40 feet, and then I've caught them as deep as 120. One thing with whitefish, when you get out like 2 in the morning, like they're nocturnal is all get. It's the BPs that we use are below. But the bite's over when the sun comes up. There are exceptions to that rule, but it's a morning thing. Early. And the exception is when they're gorging themselves on good days, in my experience. And why is that? Okay, so my system, they rise up at night, right? And that's what they eat predominantly, and that's what we're trying to imitate with skippy rigs, with low beads and all that. And that's when you catch them. So, and then they retreat to super deep water. I haven't had that. So apparently the guy's deep is 200 feet. My aqua doesn't go that deep. So my cord's 150 feet. Yes, you can run it with infrared, and you can see it. It's awesome. That's why ice fishing works, because it's really dark down here. So.
Your bottom walkers, are you using that fuel loss for the quick change out on your walkers?
Yeah, so here. I don't like this bottom walker. just like that. Yep. Yeah, this one's got an open eye, these are TVs, I just picked these up. I would just grab a pair of brown nose pliers and just wrap them. Yep.
We were told the other day, you know, like, had so much water.
I haven't had one tested. It'd be interesting too. I eat them. I peckle them. Peckle them like they're mercury. If I die because I eat too much mercury and fish, like, I've lived a pretty good life. And I also go down and I spear bluefin tuna because I like eating toilet. I mean, to each their own. You know, my wife doesn't eat it. I'll say that. She maybe gets one meal of walleye per month. Like, you know, she's breastfeeding her kids. But, you know, I take what I can eat. That's that. And she eats other fish though. Wow.
Part of the winter, what would be your walleye choice presentation and location?
This right here. This is what I went out doing. So today, I fished 30 foot of water. I fished maybe 4 hours. I was into Pike. What's that tell me? I'm fishing too shallow right now. So those fish are probably, I mean, I catch walleye as deep as 120 feet. So if I had more time, I would have bumped out to the 50-foot contour and I would have started there. Would ground that out for a little while. And then I'd probably start catching lake trout too. Like Lakers, love the slow death hook, by the way. I've got a lot of monster Lakers on them. Yeah, and they're fun to catch. So, I mean, it's like any time now. Like as soon as we get another water event, then it's just going to switch over to plugs. But right now, I'm going to be crawler harness fishing until I find a concentration of fish. I'm going to sit on those fish and either run blade baits on them or I'm going to jig. And I might be in one little area where I know there's fish. I'm marking fish. If I see one on my aqua view, I'm going to grind on those fish until I get one bite. And pretty small females are pretty tough to catch. I gotta start messing around more at night. Like some of my buddies are catching 17, 18 pound walleye at night on Columbia. Like right now, it's a full moon thing. So yeah, it's a lot warmer down there. It's really cold up here, but I've got that huge craft now with a hard top and decent gear, so it's kind of nice. Anything else? I think I'm done.